Some of the funniest comedies ever made have gotten terrible reviews. So what do fans know that critics don't? Sometimes it's smarter to be dumber. Slapstick comedies had a renaissance in the 90s thanks to films like There's Something About Mary, Billy Madison, and Dumb and Dumber. Decades later, some of the biggest stars of the era reunited to explore what became of those kinds of characters in middle age. The result was 2010's Grown Ups, starring Adam Sandler, Kevin James, David Spade, Chris Rock, and Rob Schneider as high school friends who reunite 30-odd years after winning their state basketball championship. It's exactly the kind of movie they'd have made in the early 90s, just aged up for fans who were now middle-aged themselves.
Can't believe we're doing this.
How do we always let Lenny talk us into the stupidest stuff?
Critics lambasted the film, giving it a scathing 10% score on Rotten Tomatoes, but audiences understood what they didn't. Grown Ups is just 5 raunchy 90s comics doing what they do best. And while it has its flaws, they're the same weaknesses of the best 90s comedies, which might explain why it did well enough at the box office to generate a sequel. The perfect example of a movie that gets better with age, 2001's Freddy Got Fingered has been the beneficiary of changing attitudes. A slapstick comedy from writer-actor Tom Green, it tells the story of a witless, inept weirdo named Freddy who sets out to become a successful artist, with comic hijinks ensuing when he's given $1 million to make his own cartoon. With the benefit of hindsight, there's something of a meta-story to be found here. The story of Freddy's attempts to make a cartoon after being handed a massive budget by misguided studio executives appears to be a comment on the production of the film itself. Many of its jokes seem designed to poke fun at the lunacy of giving Green a huge budget and no oversight. Sure, the movie may not be as funny if it's viewed as a straightforward comedy, as its initial 12% rating on Rotten Tomatoes suggests. But seen from a different angle, the film's own ineptitude can be seen as a critique of the dumb decisions that go into making movies. Christina Applegate was a major TV star in the 80s thanks to Married with Children, and in the early 90s she made the jump to film. In 1991, she starred in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, a dark teen comedy that follows a group of kids whose babysitter kicks the bucket while their parents are on vacation. Applegate plays Sue Ellen, a 17-year-old high schooler with 3 younger brothers and a sister who's excited to be in charge over the summer. But to her dismay, her mother has hired a cruel old woman to keep an eye on the kids. So when the babysitter croaks, Sue Ellen decides to keep it a secret so they can have the summer to themselves. The movie's laughs are lowbrow, but its dark streak is where it shines. Critics don't always get black comedy, as evidenced by its 35% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but this one delivers.
I think we should measure it first.
Attack off her head.
Yeah!
One of film's classic comedy teams, Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder collaborated 4 times. But while Stir Crazy and Silver Streak often get the most attention, it's 1989's See No Evil, Hear No Evil that might be their most underrated movie, with just a 27% score on Rotten Tomatoes. The film follows the unlikely friendship between a blind man and a deaf man. Following their first awkward meeting, the pair inadvertently become witnesses to a murder, making them targets of a pair of dastardly criminals who are willing to kill to acquire a priceless coin.
You can hear me! No! Schmuck! I'm deaf!
Sure, Stir Crazy and Silver Streak are better films, but the slapstick comedy of See No Evil, Hear No Evil is top-notch. So why did critics hate it? Well, probably because it was judged by the standards of a late 80s comedy, when in reality, it's much more like a classic Hollywood farce. But if you love slapstick, you won't be disappointed. Mike Myers became a global star thanks to films like Austin Powers, Shrek, and Wayne's World. But one movie that rarely gets mentioned in the same conversations is his 1993 black comedy So I Married an Axe Murderer. The subject of the film is Charlie, a perpetually single serial dater and poet who is eager to prove that he can commit to a woman. So he's thrilled when he meets Harriet, a local butcher, and finally finds himself wanting to settle down. Unfortunately, after tying the knot, he begins to suspect that Harriet may in fact be an axe-wielding serial killer. Once again, critics didn't seem to get the whole black comedy thing, only bestowing a 55% score on the tomato meter. The movie is definitely dark, but it's all done with Myers' typically farcical sense of humor. Being sandwiched between a pair of classic Wayne's World movies, it's understandable that so many have overlooked this one. Before Tom Hanks was winning Oscars for serious dramatic roles, he was best known for a series of 80s comedies like Big and Splash. But they weren't all hits, as proven by his 1989 film The Burbs, which was saddled with a lousy 56% Rotten Tomatoes score. The movie's premise, about a family who suspects their new neighbors are up to no good, is mundane enough to be from a sitcom. but it's the eerie vibe and nearly supernatural elements that take things up a notch. And director Joe Dante makes things really weird, with Roger Ebert calling it something between Beetlejuice and The Twilight Zone.
We're the lunatics! Us! It's not them!
While Ebert didn't like the film, The Burbs has aged well as a biting satire aimed at the drudgery of suburban life and 80s excess, providing even more laughs today than at the time. It might come as a surprise, but some of the most famous and beloved comedies from the 80s weren't met with good reviews and still don't test well with critics. That includes Weekend at Bernie's, a 1989 summertime teen favorite that only has a 54% score on Rotten Tomatoes. You probably know the premise. A pair of corporate losers are invited to a beach house party by their boss, Bernie, who promptly drops dead at the hands of the mafia. Not wanting to miss the party, the dim-witted pair try their best to convince the other guests that the very dead Bernie is in fact still alive. All the while, a pair of hitmen are trying to whack the pair of witless weirdos. A series of non-stop madcap antics, Weekend at Bernie's isn't smart comedy, but it might be the best of the dumb ones.
Hey, Les, can we stay at your house till the cops come or what? It's just Bernie!
Argylle is directed and produced by Matthew Vaughn, the man behind X-Men First Class, Kick-Ass, and the Kingsman series. Led by Henry Cavill, the film is brimming with stars, yet despite all the talent, Argylle crashed and burned with a 33% Rotten Tomatoes score, with critics ripping it for its convoluted plot and overlong runtime. Nevertheless, the movie is a slick and exciting one, and it's legitimately funny at times. Cavill plays a fictional super spy, the lead character in a series of novels by author Ellie Conway. While working on her latest book in the Argylle series, however, a real-life spy asks for help to stop a diabolical terrorist organization that seems patterned after the baddies in her books. While reviews for the film weren't necessarily wrong about Argylle, it's still hilarious, with its tongue firmly planted in its cheek. It makes clever observations about spy stories while never feeling trite or superfluous, putting plenty of clever twists on old ideas. In the late 80s and early 90s, the Kids in the Hall went from an underground Canadian sketch comedy troupe to cult classic comics when Saturday Night Live producer Lorne Michaels gave the gang their own series. After the show came to an end in 1993, the kids reunited for a 1996 feature film, Kids in the Hall: Brain Candy. Like Monty Python before them, the Kids in the Hall take a series of sketches and string them into a loose story for the movie. This time, it's about a new pharmaceutical drug called Gleaminex, an antidepressant that's unleashed on the public with little idea of what it can actually do. And of course, Gleaminex turns out to have some powerful side effects. Brain Candy confronts the real horrors of mental health problems while also serving as a stinging takedown of the pharmaceutical industry. It wasn't quite as strong as the show it was spawned from, but it's a wickedly funny movie that deserves to be rated a lot higher than its 44% score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Open.
My face tells me it's sugar. Ow!
Thank you.
In 1998, just a few months after Norm Macdonald was fired from Saturday Night Live, his first big movie came out, Dirty Work. Co-starring Howard Stern show regular Artie Lang and fellow SNL alum Chevy Chase, the vulgar, lowbrow comedy earned a miserable 14% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like Macdonald's stint on SNL, the film was popular with a certain small subset of fans who appreciated its dark edge. But it's only more recently, especially since Macdonald's unexpected death in 2021, that Dirty Work has been re-evaluated, becoming something of a cult classic in the process. Robin Williams appeared in more rotten movies than you might expect, including Death to Smoochy, a lesser appreciated film in his arsenal that deserves more recognition. Released in 2002, it came at a time when Williams was dabbling in darker stories, including thrillers like 1 Hour Photo and The Final Cut. But Death to Smoochy is a black comedy where Williams plays Rainbow Randolph, a costumed TV mascot whose career is destroyed after he's caught up in controversy. Replaced by a new character named Smoochy, Randolph goes on a rampage, dead set on destroying Smoochy and getting his old job back. Decried for its dark edge and morbid sense of humor, Death to Smoochy was decidedly unloved by reviewers, as its 42% score on Rotten Tomatoes attests. But ordinary moviegoers gave it a thumbs up, proving that, once again, black comedy doesn't usually go over well with the pros. Movie spoofs seem to either become classics, like Airplane or The Naked Gun, or else they're considered to be at the bottom of the barrel. But a real rarity is the spoof that's both, like 2002's Kung Pao Enter the Fist, which is a stone-cold classic despite earning an abominable 13% on Rotten Tomatoes. Kung Pao spoofs Hong Kong cinema, but it's also a high-concept film that may have been a bit too meta for critics and reviewers. The film's writer, director, and star, Steve Odekirk, purchased the rights to the 1976 Cantonese-language martial arts film The Savage Killers and used special effects and new footage to put himself into the leading role. Sure, Kung Pao Enter the Fist may not be a great movie in a vacuum, and some of the jokes are predictable or half-hearted. But the concept is just so clever, not to mention well executed, with intentionally bad dubbing and awkward editing, that it's impossible not to laugh.
Thank you, squirrel friend. Your soft, cushy body helped absorb the force of his blow.
1998's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was directed by Monty Python vet Terry Gilliam and based on the semi-autobiographical book of the same name by infamous gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson. A mix of fiction and real life, Fear and Loathing stars Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro as reporter Raoul Duke and his drug-addled lawyer and cohort Dr. Gonzo. The adventures that follow are less a plot-driven story than a series of wild drug-fueled antics that result in non-stop laughs thanks to the absolute insanity that ensues. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas only garnered a 51% score on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and was a box office flop. But thanks to the cast's wild performances, it has since become a cult classic.